She grabbed my hair and dragged me off the hospital bed while I was 9 months pregnant. Blood dripped from my scalp as she screamed, "Your baby will never be born!" But what broke me wasn't her attack. It was seeing my mother-in-law standing in the doorway, smiling. That smile haunts me even today, months later, when I wake up in cold sweats. What happened next exposed secrets that destroyed an entire family empire. If you want to know how deep betrayal can go and how savage revenge can be, stay until the very end. Hit subscribe because this story has twists you won't see coming. Let me tell you how my perfect life became a nightmare. My name is Isabella, and this is my story. I used to believe in fairy tales. I really did. You know those stories where the poor girl meets the prince, falls in love, and lives happily ever after? That's what I thought my life would be. But nobody tells you about the monsters that hide in castles. Nobody warns you that sometimes the dragon isn't guarding the tower. It's already inside, sitting at the dinner table, wearing pearls and designer perfume. 4 years ago, I was working as a volunteer nurse at St. Grace Memorial Hospital. Nothing fancy, just helping families in the charity wing who couldn't afford proper medical care. I'd always loved taking care of people, making them feel safe when they were scared. The pay was terrible, my apartment was tiny, but I was happy. I had purpose. I had peace. That's where I met Daniel Anderson. He walked into the pediatric ward one afternoon to announce a donation for a new children's wing. I was holding a little girl named Sophie who was terrified of her upcoming surgery, singing softly to calm her down. When I looked up, I saw him standing in the doorway, watching me with these gentle, tired eyes. Most rich men have this coldness about them, like they're calculating your worth in their head. But Daniel looked different. He looked human. We talked for hours that day, not about money or business, but about life, about what really matters. He asked me why I chose nursing, and I told him about losing my younger brother to cancer when I was 16, how helpless I felt, how I never wanted anyone to feel that alone in a hospital again. He told me about losing his grandmother, the only person who truly understood him, and how empty his big house felt. When he asked for my number, I almost laughed. What would a billionaire want with someone like me? But he called the next day, and the day after that. Our dates weren't fancy. Quiet restaurants, long walks in the park, coffee shops where we'd talk until they closed. He treated me like I mattered, like my thoughts and dreams were important. After a year, he proposed on the same park bench where we'd had our first real conversation. I said yes before he even finished asking. The wedding was beautiful, everything I'd dreamed of. But that's when reality started creeping in. Helen Anderson, Daniel's mother, made it very clear from our first meeting that I wasn't welcome in her family. She looked at me like I was dirt she'd stepped in. "A nurse," she'd said, her voice dripping with disgust. "How charitable of you, Daniel." She never called me by name, always the girl or her, like I wasn't even worth acknowledging directly. Daniel's father, Lawrence, seemed kinder but always distant, buried in his newspapers and business calls. And Ryan, Daniel's younger brother, treated me with this polite coldness that somehow felt worse than Helen's open hatred. But Daniel promised it would get better. "They just need time," he'd say, holding me close at night. "They'll see how amazing you are." I believed him because I loved him, because I wanted so desperately for it to be true. We moved into the family mansion, into our own wing, but it never felt like home. Helen would make comments at every family dinner, little poisonous drops disguised as concern. "That dress doesn't quite suit you, dear. You really should learn about wine if you're going to be an Anderson. I do hope you're taking etiquette classes." Daniel would defend me, but her words stayed with me, burrowing under my skin like splinters. After 2 years of marriage, I got pregnant. The morning I saw those 2 pink lines on the test, I actually fell to my knees crying. We'd been trying for so long, praying every month, dealing with disappointment after disappointment. When I told Daniel, he picked me up and spun me around, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. "We're going to be parents," he kept saying, his hand on my still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." I thought this would change everything. I thought a baby would make Helen accept me, would bring the family together. I was so naive. The first trimester was brutal. Morning sickness hit me like a freight train. I couldn't keep anything down, lost weight instead of gaining it, spent most mornings hugging the toilet. Helen would watch me at breakfast with this satisfied look, making comments about how weak I looked, how she'd sailed through her pregnancies without any issues. "Are you sure you're strong enough for this, dear?" she'd ask, her voice sweet as poison. Carrying an Anderson heir is quite a responsibility. By month 4, my belly started showing, and Daniel became obsessively protective in the most wonderful way. He'd talk to the baby every night, his hand warm on my stomach, telling our little one about all the places they'd explore together, all the things he'd teach them. Those moments felt magical, like we were in our own perfect bubble. But strange things started happening around the house. I'd find Helen having private meetings in her study with the door locked, her voice low and urgent. Once I walked past and heard her say, "Just wait a little longer. Timing is everything." When I asked Daniel about it, he smiled and said she was probably planning a surprise baby shower. I wanted to believe him. Items in our room started moving. My jewelry box would be open when I knew I'd closed it. My diary would be on the wrong side of my nightstand. My prenatal vitamins looked tampered with, the seal broken, the pills scattered differently. I mentioned it to Daniel once, but he gently took my hands and said, "Sweetheart, pregnancy hormones can make us feel paranoid. You're safe here. I promise." The 7th month brought more unease. I felt watched constantly. The house staff started avoiding eye contact with me, scurrying away when I entered rooms. Strange phone calls came to the house landline. Someone would call, I'd answer, and they'd immediately hang up. It happened at least 3 times a week. I'd see Helen watching me sometimes with this calculating look in her eyes, like she was measuring something, waiting for something. Month 8 was when Helen's behavior shifted dramatically. She suddenly became attentive, almost sweet. She'd ask about my doctor appointments, insisting on knowing the exact dates and times so the family can support you properly. She wanted to know everything. When the baby was due, what the doctors said, when they expected labor to start. I thought she was finally warming up to me, finally excited about her grandson. God, I was such a fool. By month 9, I was exhausted and enormous. My back ached constantly, my feet were so swollen I could only wear slippers, and I couldn't sleep for more than 2 hours at a time before little Andrew, we'd found out it was a boy, would kick me awake. But I was happy. The nursery was ready, painted soft yellow with clouds on the ceiling. We had tiny clothes washed and folded, a crib Daniel had assembled himself, refusing help because he wanted to build his son's first bed with his own hands. The morning everything changed started like any other. I had my final checkup scheduled at St. Grace Hospital. Daniel was getting dressed for work, and I remember feeling uneasy, though I couldn't explain why. "Big board meeting today," he said, kissing my forehead. "It's been on the calendar for months, sweetheart. But if you need me, if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately and I'll be there in minutes." Helen appeared at our bedroom door, perfectly dressed as always in a cream-colored pantsuit and expensive jewelry. "Daniel, you go to your meeting," she said firmly. "Isabella will be fine. It's just a routine checkup. Marcus will drive her, and security will be right there." Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist, but Daniel was already nodding, already kissing me goodbye, promising to call the moment his meeting ended. The drive to the hospital felt strange. Marcus, my usual bodyguard, seemed tense. He kept checking his phone, glancing at me in the rearview mirror with an expression I couldn't read. I sat in the back seat with my hand on my belly, feeling Andrew moving around. "Just a quick visit, baby boy," I whispered, "then we'll go home and rest." Dr. Patterson did the full examination and smiled warmly. "Everything is absolutely perfect, Isabella. Andrew is in ideal position, head down, ready to go. You could go into labor any time now, today, tomorrow, this week. Your body is completely prepared." She helped me to a private recovery room to rest before heading home, which was standard for VIP patients. "Just relax for 20 minutes, let your blood pressure settle, then you can go." I lay on the hospital bed, feeling peaceful despite my earlier unease. The room was quiet, sunlight streaming through the window. I had a baby name book in my hands, though we'd already chosen Andrew. I was just flipping through it, imagining our son's future, when I heard shouting outside my door. Marcus's voice, urgent and angry. Another male voice I didn't recognize. A loud thud that shook the door. My heart started pounding. I reached for the call button beside my bed, the one that would bring nurses running. I pressed it over and over. Nothing happened. I looked closer and my blood ran cold. The cord had been cut clean through. Someone had deliberately disabled it. Then my door exploded open, slamming against the wall so hard it left a dent in the plaster. She stood there like something from a nightmare. Her hair was a tangled, greasy mess, her red dress wrinkled and stained with God knows what. But it was her eyes that paralyzed me. Completely wild, unfocused, burning with a hatred so intense it felt like heat coming off her body. I recognized her immediately from old photos Daniel had shown me years ago. Natalie, his ex-girlfriend from 8 years back, the one who'd become dangerously obsessed after their breakup, the one who'd been involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility. "You!" she hissed, moving toward me with jerky, unnatural movements like a puppet on strings. "You stole everything from me, my life, my future, my Daniel, my baby." I tried to push myself up, but at 9 months pregnant, I was slow and clumsy. "Natalie, please," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though terror was squeezing my chest. "Daniel and you broke up a long time ago. I never even knew you. I had nothing to do with— Liar!" The scream was inhuman, full of raw rage. She lunged at me with shocking speed, her hands closing around my throat. Her fingers dug into my windpipe like claws, cutting off my air. I grabbed her wrists, trying to pull them away, but she was surprisingly strong. My vision started going dark at the edges. "That baby inside you," she snarled, her face inches from mine, spit flying from her lips. "That baby was supposed to be mine. He loved me first. He promised me forever." I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. Black spots danced across my vision. Then suddenly she released my throat and I gasped desperately for air. But before I could even process what was happening, she grabbed a fistful of my hair at the roots and yanked with brutal force. The pain was immediate and blinding. She dragged me off the bed, and I crashed to the floor on my side, trying desperately to protect my belly. "No, please, the baby," I managed to choke out, but she didn't care. She was beyond reasoning, beyond humanity. She dragged me across the floor by my hair, and I felt clumps of it ripping from my scalp. Warm blood trickled down my temples. I was screaming now, begging, but she just kept pulling, kept screaming her own rage. Then she started kicking. Her foot connected with my lower back, once, twice. The pain was indescribable. I curled into the tightest ball I could manage, my arms wrapped around my pregnant belly, trying to shield Andrew from the assault. She kicked my shoulder blade and I heard a crack. The fourth stand. She grabbed it and raised it above her head like a weapon. "Your baby will never be born!" she shrieked, bringing it down toward my stomach. I rolled at the last second and it hit my shoulder instead, but the impact sent shockwaves of agony through my entire body. She raised it again and I was screaming, crying, praying for someone to help us. Then through my tears, through the chaos, I saw the doorway. Helen was standing there, just standing there, watching. Our eyes met, and she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small, satisfied curve of her lips, like she was watching a play she'd directed, pleased with how the performance was going. "Mother," I gasped, blood from my scalp dripping into my eyes. "Help me, please." She turned and walked away. Just turned and calmly walked away down the corridor. Natalie saw me looking and laughed, high and manic. "She paid me, you stupid girl. She paid me to come here. $500,000 to get rid of you and that bastard child." She raised the IV stand again. "She wants you dead." Before she could bring it down, I felt a sudden wetness between my legs. Warm fluid soaking through my hospital gown. My water had broken. Contractions hit me like a sledgehammer, violent and immediate. I screamed. a sound I didn't know I could make, primal and terrified. Natalie raised the IV stand for what would have been the killing blow, but suddenly security burst through the door. 2 large men tackled her to the ground, wrestling the IV stand from her hands. She fought like a demon, screaming obscenities, but they held her down. More people flooded in, nurses, doctors, all shouting at once. Someone was checking my pulse, someone else examining my belly. "We need emergency surgery now," I heard Dr. Patterson yell. "The baby's in distress." "Prep OR2 immediately." They lifted me onto a gurney, and I remember the ceiling tiles blurring past as they ran me down corridors. The pain was overwhelming, contractions, injuries, fear all mixing into one nightmare. "My baby," I kept whispering. "Please, save my baby." Daniel's face appeared above me suddenly, pale and terrified. I'm here," he was saying, running alongside the gurney, holding my hand. "You're going to be okay. Both of you are going to be okay." "Your mother," I gasped. "Daniel, your mother. She was there. She paid her." I saw something change in his eyes, something dark and cold that I'd never seen before, not in 4 years of marriage. But then they were pushing him away, telling him he couldn't come into the operating room, and someone was putting a mask over my face, and everything went black. I woke up to beeping machines and fluorescent lights. My entire body felt like it had been hit by a truck. But the first thing I heard was crying. Not my crying, but the beautiful, angry wailing of a newborn baby. I turned my head, which sent pain shooting down my neck, and saw Daniel sitting in a chair beside my bed, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in blue. "He's here," Daniel said softly, tears streaming down his face. "Andrew is here. He's perfect, Isabella. 10 fingers, 10 toes, perfect. They'd had to do an emergency C-section." Andrew had been in distress from the trauma of the attack, his heart rate dropping dangerously, but the doctors got him out in time. He wasn't breathing at first, and those seconds must have been an eternity for Daniel, but they resuscitated him, and he came back fighting, crying at the top of his tiny lungs. I reached out with shaking hands, and Daniel carefully placed our son in my arms. He was so small, so perfect, with a tiny face all scrunched up and angry at the world. I started crying, overwhelmed with love and relief and trauma all at once. "What happened to her?" I whispered. "To Natalie?" Daniel's face hardened. "In police custody. But Isabella..." He took a deep breath. "They found security footage from the hospital cameras. Everything was recorded. Helen letting Natalie into the building. Helen bribing Marcus to take a bathroom break at the exact time of your appointment. Helen in your room earlier that morning cutting your call button cord. And audio, they caught audio of her giving Natalie final instructions outside your door." I felt like I'd been punched. "What?" "She paid Natalie $500,000, Daniel said, his voice barely controlled. "Transferred from an offshore account Ryan helped her set up. The plan was for Natalie to kill you and Andrew, make it look like a random attack from a mentally ill woman. Then Helen would support me through my grief and eventually convince me to marry someone more suitable to the family." "Ryan knew?" My voice cracked. "Ryan helped coordinate everything. He's the one who told Helen your appointment time. He's the one who made sure my board meeting ran long so I wouldn't be there to protect you." Daniel's hands were shaking with rage. "My own mother, my own brother. They tried to murder my wife. They tried to murder my son." A detective came that evening to take my statement. I told him everything, every terrible detail, while Daniel held my hand so tight I thought my bones would break. They showed me the security footage, and watching Helen calmly let Natalie into the hospital, watching her smile and nod as that monster walked toward my room, was almost worse than the attack itself. The audio was even more damning. Helen's voice, cold and clear. "Do it quickly. Make it look violent so there's no question it was a random attack, and make sure both of them are gone." The police arrested Helen and Ryan that night. Daniel made sure there were cameras present when they were handcuffed and led away. I saw the footage later. Helen, still perfectly dressed, her face twisted with rage, screaming that I was a liar, that I'd manipulated everyone. Ryan looked terrified, trying to say he'd just been following his mother's orders, that he didn't really want anyone hurt. But Daniel had become someone I didn't recognize. The gentle, kind man I'd married had transformed into something cold and calculating. "They showed my wife and child no mercy," he said in a press conference the next day, me still recovering in the hospital bed. "I will show them none." And he didn't. Within 48 hours, the entire city knew what Helen and Ryan had done. Daniel didn't just rely on news coverage. He bought primetime slots on every major channel and had the security footage played during family viewing hours. Millions of people watched Helen Anderson, society queen, conspiracy to commit murder. Watched her smile as she enabled an attempted killer. The family company stocks crashed, dropping 40% in a single day. Daniel called an emergency board meeting and had Helen and Ryan removed from all positions. Every asset tied to them, trust funds, properties, investments, frozen immediately. Their personal accounts emptied by legal holds. But Daniel didn't stop there. He used every connection he had, and he had many. Within a week, Helen's name was removed from every charity board, every building she'd donated to. Her country club revoked her membership. Friends who'd known her for decades publicly distanced themselves. Ryan's fiancé broke off their engagement on live television, crying about how betrayed she felt. The trial was brutal. Daniel made sure it was televised, every damning moment broadcast for the world to see. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank transfers, text messages, recorded conversations. Natalie's confession, where she detailed exactly how Helen had contacted her in the psychiatric facility, promised her money and freedom if she'd take care of a problem. The courtroom was packed every day. I testified from a wheelchair, still recovering from my injuries, baby Andrew in Daniel's arms in the front row. I showed the jury photographs of my scalp injuries, the bald patches where hair had been ripped out, the bruises that still covered my body. I told them about Helen's smile in that doorway. Natalie was sentenced first, 25 years in maximum security prison with no possibility of parole. She screamed and fought as they led her away, still insisting Daniel belonged to her. Then came Helen's sentencing. She stood there in an orange jumpsuit, looking small and old in a way I'd never seen before, all her polish and elegance stripped away. 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and endangerment of a minor. Ryan got 10 years as an accomplice. Before the judge's final ruling, Daniel stood up and approached the bench. He was holding Andrew, our tiny son, sleeping peacefully against his chest. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady and cold, "these people showed my wife no mercy as she begged for her life and our child's life. They watched her bleed and felt satisfaction. I ask that you show them exactly the mercy they showed my family." Helen actually tried to speak then, tried to apologize, but Daniel turned his back on her. "You're dead to me," he said simply. "Both of you." Lawrence, Daniel's father, divorced Helen from prison. He visits us sometimes now, his relationship with Andrew the only thing that brings light to his eyes. He apologized 1,000 times, saying he never knew, never suspected. I believe him. He's a broken man, realizing too late what his wife really was. We moved out of the mansion into a beautiful house of our own, away from all those dark memories. 3 months have passed since that horrible day. My physical wounds have healed. The bald patches on my scalp have grown back. The bruises have faded. My shoulder blade is mended. But I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, feeling hands around my throat, hearing that manic laughter. Daniel started therapy with me, both of us learning to trust again, to feel safe again. Andrew is growing so fast, so healthy and perfect. He has Daniel's eyes and my nose, and when he smiles, it makes everything we went through feel worth it. We started a foundation for domestic violence survivors and families affected by betrayal. We wanted something good to come from our nightmare. Last month, we opened our 3rd shelter, and seeing the relief on those women's faces when they realize they're safe reminds me why we survived. Just last week, I received a letter in the mail. Prison postmark. It was from Helen. For a moment, I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. I expected an apology, maybe even genuine remorse after months behind bars to think about what she'd done. Instead, it was filled with hatred, blame, curses. She wrote that I'd destroyed her family, seduced her son, turned everyone against her. She said I'd pay for what I'd done, that karma would find me. I showed the letter to Daniel. Without a word, he made a phone call to his legal team. By the end of the day, Helen had been transferred to maximum security, all her remaining privileges revoked, all visitor rights terminated. "Now you have nothing but your thoughts," Daniel wrote in his only communication to her. "Enjoy them." We never spoke of her again. That's how my mother-in-law tried to kill me and my unborn baby, and how my husband destroyed his own family for justice. Some people say Daniel went too far, that revenge is never the answer. Others say he should have done worse. What's your opinion? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story shocked you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories like this. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, sometimes the real monsters don't hide under beds or in dark alleys. Sometimes they sit across from you at dinner, wearing expensive jewelry and fake smiles. The people who are supposed to love you can sometimes be the most dangerous of all. Stay safe, everyone. Trust your instincts, and never let anyone make you doubt what you know in your heart is true. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time.